The observation deck of Kepler 7 station had always been quiet. It was the kind of place where people came to think, to breathe, and to remember why they worked in the cold depths of space. But today, there was no peace here. The silence felt wrong, like the moment before a storm arrives. Dr. Jiwon stood with her hands pressed against the transparent aluminum window, watching the stars beyond. Her reflection stared back at her, tired eyes, dark hair pulled back tightly, a face that had seen too many sleepless nights. She was the coalition's leading epidemiologist, the person everyone turned to when biology went wrong. And right now, everything was wrong. Behind her, emergency broadcasts played on every screen. The Vrelian Empire had gone silent. All communication stopped 14 hours ago. Not a single transmission from any of their 7 star systems. The Vrelians were merchants and traders, people who spoke constantly, who flooded communications channels with business deals and cultural exchanges. Silence from them was more frightening than any scream. Commander Teo entered without knocking. He was a tall man with the careful movements of someone trained to handle crises. His uniform bore the marks of 40 years of military service, small patches, quiet honors that meant only other soldiers noticed. He had that particular look in his eyes that Ji-Won recognized. The look of someone who had already read the reports and understood they were worse than anyone wanted to admit. The Solians aren't responding either, he said quietly. Their last communication was incomplete. Just the beginning of a distress signal before everything stopped. Ji-Won did not turn away from the window. How many dead? We don't know. The Vrelians number in the billions. The Solians, we're not even sure how many Solians exist. Their population records are encrypted in ways we cannot access. Teo moved to stand beside her. But the medical reports from the RIM stations tell us something. People are dying very quickly, very quickly. A shiver ran down Ji-Won's spine. She had studied diseases for 30 years. She knew that speed meant something dangerous, something new, something that had not been seen before in the Coalition's medical records. Fast-moving plagues killed the weak and elderly. They burnt out quickly, but sometimes, rarely, terrifyingly, a disease could move fast and keep moving. It could keep killing and never stop. "Show me the data," she said, finally turning to face him. They walked together through the station's white corridors. Other staff moved past them quickly, their faces worried. News was spreading. Fear was spreading even faster. When they reached the medical center, Counselor Ha-Jin was already waiting. She was a woman of middle years, with sharp eyes that saw everything. She represented the Zithian Empire on the Coalition Council, and she had the kind of quiet authority that made people listen. 30 minutes, Ha-Jin said without greeting. That is how long it takes for the illness to move from infection to death. 30 minutes. Dr. Ji-Won, I have read the medical files. This is not a disease. This is extinction. Ji-Won moved to the screens showing genetic analysis of the pathogen. The scientists had worked quickly, pulling samples from the few communications the Vrelians had managed to send before going dark. What she saw made her chest tighten. The pathogen was unlike anything in the database. It attacked multiple types of cellular systems at once. It was aggressive, efficient, and it spread through the air with terrible ease. Transmission rate? She asked. 98%, one of the technicians answered. In a closed environment, nearly everyone infected will spread it to others. In open populations, we estimate 70 to 80% will catch it before even knowing they are sick. The numbers were impossible. They were worse than impossible. They were the numbers of extinction. How far has it spread? Ji-Won asked. We believe it started in the Vrelian core worlds. From there, it jumped to trading stations. The Solians made contact with a Vrelian merchant ship 7 days ago. The Kronathi... Ha-Jin paused. Her face became very still. The Kronathi Empire was in negotiations with both races. They believe they may have been exposed as well. The Cronathi Empire was not the largest power in the coalition, but they were strong. They had biological enhancements and genetic modifications that made them resistant to most diseases. If the Cronathi were falling ill, this meant nothing could stop the spread. "We need to establish a quarantine," Teo said. "Seal all the affected systems, lock down travel, send medical teams." "With what?" Ji-Wan interrupted. "We have no treatment. We have no vaccine. We don't even know how to slow it down. A quarantine only works if you catch it early. The Vrelians are already gone. The Salians may already be gone. And if the Cronathi are infected, a quarantine will simply trap dying people inside their own homes." The three of them stood in silence. The screens around them showed data, numbers, genetic sequences. Each number represented lives. Each sequence represented a civilization that had built cities and temples, that had created art and music, that had loved their families and believed in their future. "There might be something," Ha-Jin said slowly. She turned to look at both of them. "There is one population we have never fully studied, one biology we do not completely understand. They are far behind us technologically, but their evolution followed different paths than ours. Different pressures, different environments." "You are speaking of Earth," Teo said. It was not a question. "The humans," Ha-Jin confirmed. "The Council sealed them away 300 years ago, deemed them too undeveloped for contact, too primitive. But that decision was based on their technology, not their biology. We have only surface-level understanding of how their bodies work, and their evolutionary history includes surviving plagues that wiped out other species on their world. They have biology that adapted to threat constantly. Accessing Earth means breaking Council law," Teo said. "The prohibition on contact is irrelevant if there is no coalition left to enforce it," Ha-Jin interrupted. "If we do nothing, within 3 weeks we will be the last 3 people in this entire station. Within 30 days, nothing will be left but empty ships and empty worlds. I am suggesting we break the law to save everything." Ji-Wan felt something shift inside her. She understood what Ha-Jin was proposing. It was desperate. It was radical. It was also the only option that made any kind of sense. She thought of the Vrelians already lost. She thought of the Solians and their crystalline cities going silent forever. She thought of billions of people across known space who would die if nothing changed. "How much time do we need?" she asked. "To synthesize a vaccine from human biology?" Ji-Wan calculated quickly. 7 to 10 days if we have fresh biological samples and can work without interruption. Longer if we face complications. "Then we need to contact them immediately," Ha-Jin said. "We need to break 300 years of isolation. We need to break Council law. And we need to pray that the humans are exactly what we hope they are." She moved to the communication console and began entering authorization codes. Codes that would send a ship toward Earth. Codes that would change everything. The sky above Seoul turned red at 3 in the morning. Park Min-soo was sitting in his office, reading through new research papers when the light filled his window. At first, he thought it was a fire somewhere in the city. He stood up and looked out at the night sky, and what he saw made his breath stop. A ship, not a plane, not anything human. A ship so massive that it blocked out the stars and its lights turned the darkness into day. Within seconds, his phone buzzed. Then it rang. Then it would not stop ringing. Park Min-soo was the head of Korea's Biomedical Research Institute. He was a virologist who had spent his life studying how diseases worked and how to stop them. He was used to working with deadlines and problems that needed solving. But nothing in his education or experience had prepared him for this. By the time he reached the military headquarters, Seoul was in chaos. Sirens wailed from every direction. Military helicopters flew toward the enormous ship that hung above the city. News broadcasts screamed about invasion and aliens. Traffic on the streets had stopped completely as people either ran toward the ship or away from it. Kim Jina, an astronomer who worked with Park Min-soo at the Institute, called him during the drive. "Tell me this is a dream," she said. Her voice was shaking. "Tell me I am dreaming right now." "You are awake," Park Min-soo told her. "There are actually 17 ships. They are everywhere. Over Seoul, over Tokyo, over New York, Moscow, all at the same time." At military headquarters, they met General Lee Dong-hee in a secure room filled with screens and important-looking people. The general was older, with a calm face that did not show fear, even though fear was probably what everyone was feeling. He gestured for them to sit. "We have established communication," General Lee said. "They are not hostile. They have made a request. They are calling for scientific personnel, specifically for people who study disease and biology." Park Min-soo's mind worked quickly. This was wrong. First contact with alien life should be about language and culture and establishing peace. It should not be about disease immediately, unless something was wrong, unless something was very, very wrong. "What kind of disease?" he asked. General Lee did not answer directly. Instead, he played an audio file. The voice was strange and layered, as if many people were speaking through one sound. The alien communication was translated through a computer system that made it sound almost human. "The Vrelian Empire has fallen. The Solian civilization has ended. The Chronothi population decreases every hour. A biological pathogen with unknown origins spreads through coalition space at speeds beyond control. We have searched all genetic databases. We have no understanding of how to create immunity. We have reached one conclusion. Human biology may hold answers to biological questions we cannot answer ourselves. We request immediate access to human genetic material for analysis. We request this in the name of survival for billions of lives." The room became very silent. Park Min-soo and Kim Ji-na exchanged a look. They had both understood. The aliens were not coming to invade. They were coming because they were dying. "How long?" Park Min-soo asked. "How long do they have before the whole situation becomes impossible?" General Lee consulted with people on the communication lines. 15 days, maybe 20. After that, they estimate that all civilization in the coalition will have collapsed. No governments, no military. Just survivors trying to avoid each other. "I will go to them," Park Min-soo said. Everyone looked at him. General Lee leaned back in his chair. Kim Ji-na started to say something, then stopped. "You understand what this means?" General Lee asked. "You will be the first human to make contact with an alien species. You will be aboard their ship. If something goes wrong, then we are responsible for letting the universe burn," Park Min-soo finished. "I understand. When do I leave?" The coalition ship descended into a landing zone that had been cleared just outside Seoul. Military vehicles surrounded the area. Cameras from every news organization in the world pointed at the massive ship. Park Min-soo rode in a helicopter toward it, still wearing his regular clothes, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The inside of the ship was nothing like human ships. Everything seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Corridors curved in ways that made his eyes hurt. The walls were made of material that seemed to be alive, changing colors and textures. Aliens moved past him, beings that did not have human shapes. One looked like a cloud with eyes. Another seemed to be made entirely of crystal. A third appeared to be covered in tentacles that moved with perfect coordination. A figure approached him. She had a basically humanoid shape, but her skin was a deep blue color, and her eyes were much larger than human eyes. This was Dr. Ji-won. She moved with purpose, her face showing concern and hope in equal measure. "Welcome, Dr. Park," she said. Her English was perfect, though slightly formal. "I am Dr. Ji-won. I have been studying your solar system for the past 6 hours. What I have found is extraordinary. What we hope to find in you may save everything." They moved into a medical facility that was cleaner and more advanced than anything Park Min-soo had ever seen. Devices that he could not understand pointed at his body. Sensors took samples of his blood, his skin, his hair. It was uncomfortable, but Park Min-soo remained still and quiet. He understood that this was important. After several hours, Dr. Ji-won came to him with something like wonder in her eyes. "This is impossible," she said. "According to our analysis, you should be dead. This pathogen, it should have destroyed your immune system immediately. But you are not dead. You are healthy. And more than that, your body contains antibodies against the pathogen. Your biology has developed immunity to something you have never encountered before." "How?" Park Min-soo asked. Dr. Ji-won accessed data on a screen that appeared from the wall itself. "Your planet is old, very old, and it is also very dangerous. Your evolutionary history includes surviving biological weapons, plagues that killed 90% of your species, multiple times. Your body developed defenses against threats that were far more severe than what we face now. Your immune system did not know what to prepare for, but it prepared for everything. By accident, you are immune to the thing destroying our worlds." Park Min-soo felt the weight of those words. He thought about all the humans who had died in plagues throughout history. He thought about his ancestors surviving diseases that killed everyone around them. He thought about how pain and suffering and near extinction had shaped human biology into something that could save civilizations that had never even heard of Earth. "You will need to return to Earth," Dr. Ji-won said. "You will need to help us. If we can extract and synthesize your antibodies, we may, just may, be able to create something that will save billions of lives." "Then let's get started," Park Min-soo said. "We are already behind." They left the medical facility and began the work. Kim Ji-na, who had been waiting in communication contact the entire time, began coordinating the fastest researchers on Earth. The world learned that humans had something that nothing else in the galaxy had. Humans had something that could save everyone. And humanity, for the first time in its history, found itself at the center of a galactic emergency. The race to save civilization had begun. The lunar base Alpha was a place where the future was being made. It had been built 15 years ago as an observation post, a place to study the moon and coordinate scientific missions. Now it was becoming something else entirely. It was becoming humanity's gift to the galaxy. Dr. Oh Subin stood in the laboratory that had been converted from a storage facility just 4 days ago. Every wall was covered with equipment, most of it borrowed from human scientists, some of it provided by the Coalition. The equipment from Earth looked simple next to the alien technology, but it worked. That was what mattered. Simple things that worked were better than complicated things that did not. "How much longer?" Lieutenant Kang Hae-won asked. He stood in the corner, always watching, always making sure that the human interest in this project was protected. He had been assigned to oversee cooperation between humans and Coalition scientists. He had learned very quickly that cooperation meant different things to different species. "The antibodies are isolating correctly," Dr. Oh Subin said, her eyes never leaving the screen showing the biological structures she was manipulating. "But the problem is creating something stable enough to survive transportation and injection. Antibodies are delicate things. They break easily. The Coalition vaccines work by changing the genetics of the recipient. That takes months. We need something that works in days." Park Min-soo was working in another section of the lab, coordinating with Dr. Ji-won through a video connection. The Coalition doctor was on Kepler 7 station, now the headquarters for emergency response to the plague. On the screen, she looked exhausted. Her skin had taken on a grayish tint. She had not slept in 2 days. "The situation is worsening," Dr. Ji-won said. Her voice was calm, but the words were not. "The Kronathi have lost 60% of their population. The Vrelians now number fewer than 10,000 living individuals, and there are new reports of infection in the Kessian territories. The pathogen is not slowing, it is accelerating. Park Min-soo felt pressure in his chest. They were working as fast as they could, but fast was not fast enough. The plague was moving faster. It was consuming worlds while they sat in laboratories trying to create something that could stop it. "We will have something in 48 hours, he said. "Not perfect, not completely tested, but something real that we can begin distributing." 48 hours may be too long for some civilizations, Dr. Ji-won said quietly. But she did not argue. She understood that this was the best humanity could do. Lieutenant Kang Hai-won moved to Park Min-soo's side. "There is political pressure building," he said quietly in Korean, so that only Park Min-soo could understand. "There are coalition members who do not want to accept a vaccine developed by humans. They are calling for delay. They are arguing that accepting treatment from a developing species is beneath their dignity." "Let me guess," Park Min-soo said. "Pride is more important than life." "For some beings, yes," Kang Hai-won nodded. "There are those who believe the plague is a natural cleansing. Those who believe that accepting human help will somehow diminish them. There are extremists who have already begun attacking distribution centers." This was information that had not been shared with the coalition news networks. Park Min-soo understood why. News of internal conflict would only slow things down more. But he also understood that this meant the vaccine would not reach everyone who needed it. Not everyone would want it. The work continued. Dr. Oh Soo-bin and her team worked 16 hours a day. They slept in the laboratory. They ate food that was dispensed from machines. They became almost like machines themselves, moving through the same routines over and over, watching the same numbers change slowly on screens, hoping that those changes meant progress. Park Min-soo spent hours on video calls with medical teams across coalition space. He explained the vaccine's mechanism. He explained how it would work. He answered the same questions over and over from different species, always patient, always clear. He was becoming the face of human science to the galaxy. He was a translator between human biology and coalition medicine. It was a role he had never imagined having, but he found that he was good at it. On the 36th hour of their work, Dr. Oh Soo-bin called everyone into the main laboratory. She was holding up a small vial filled with clear liquid that seemed to glow faintly. "This is it," she said. Her voice was quiet, but filled with something like awe. "This is the first batch of active vaccine, 5,000 doses. Not enough for all the people who need it, but enough to begin. Enough to start saving lives." Everyone in the laboratory began to move. There was no celebration. There was only work. The vaccine needed to be tested, carefully but as quickly as possible. The vaccine needed to be replicated. The vaccine needed to be transported. And it needed to start saving people today, not tomorrow. Counselor Ha-jin arrived at the lunar base in person, which meant the political situation had become critical. She was a tall woman with eyes that had seen complicated things. She looked at the vaccine vial and nodded. "There are those on the council who oppose this," she said directly to Park Min-soo. "They are powerful. They control resources. But they do not control everything. I control enough. I have authorized the first distribution ships to leave for the Zithian territories. We will use your vaccine there first. If it works, if we can show the results, then the opposition will fall away." "And if it does not work?" Park Min-soo asked. "Then we will have tried," Ha-jin said. "That is all anyone can do in the face of extinction. We try, and we accept what comes after." The first distribution ship left within hours. It carried 10,000 doses of the vaccine. Its destination was a Zithian settlement on the edge of Kronathi space, a place where the plague was killing 2,000 people per day. Captain Han Kyung-soo was commanding the mission personally. He was a human officer who had been training with coalition forces for the past 7 years. He was the first human military commander in coalition space, and now he was commanding one of the most important missions in galactic history. "We will make it," he said when he received his orders. "We will get there in time, and we will make sure everyone who can receive this vaccine gets it." Park Min-soo watched the ship leave, heading toward stars he could not see from the moon. Somewhere out there, billions of people were dying. Somewhere out there, civilizations were being erased from existence. And somewhere on that ship, thousands of doses of a vaccine developed by humans was traveling to try to stop it. "Now we wait," Dr. Oh Subin said. She was standing next to him, looking out at the lunar landscape. "Now we find out if we were fast enough, if we were good enough, if our work matters." "It matters," Park Min-soo said. "Whatever happens, we tried. And that is something humanity has never had the chance to do before. We tried to save the galaxy." Captain Han Kyung-soo had been trained his entire life for combat. He had studied military strategy, weapon systems, and the art of making decisions under pressure, but nothing had prepared him for what he was seeing through the view screen of his ship. The Zithian world below was not under attack. It looked like a world dying from the inside. The cities were still there, the buildings still stood, but there was no movement in the streets. There were no lights in the windows. When the ship descended, the team that met them was small and desperate. They were Zithians who had survived so far, holding on to hope that someone would arrive with something that could stop the endless dying. "How long?" Han asked the lead medical officer, a Zithian named Krell who had managed to stay alive through a combination of luck and determination. "Hours," Krell answered. His voice sounded like wind moving through hollow spaces. "Perhaps a day for some. The plague takes the strong first. The young die quickly. The elderly hold on longer, but it is only a prolonging of suffering." Han ordered the vaccine to be distributed immediately. The medical teams that had come with him began the massive work of finding survivors and delivering doses. It was not organized the way military operations usually were. It was desperate and chaotic. It was people running through dead or dying cities, looking for anyone still breathing, hoping the vaccine would work. Physician Choi Mi-young had volunteered for this mission specifically because she knew what she would find. She was a doctor who had spent her career helping people. She was not afraid of death. She had learned long ago that fear got in the way of saving lives. So she moved through the Zithian cities with steady hands and calm eyes, injecting people with the human-developed vaccine, and then sitting with them to make sure the vaccine did not cause immediate harm. Some people recovered quickly. Within hours, their symptoms began to fade. The fever dropped. The difficulty breathing eased. They began to look like people who might live rather than people who were going to die. These were the victories. These were the moments that made the terrible things bearable. But some people died before the vaccine could reach them, and some people died even after receiving it because they were too far gone. Their bodies had already lost too much. The vaccine could not bring people back from that edge. It could only help those who still had a chance. Choi Mi-young sat with a Zithian family at one point during that first terrible day. The parents had already died. The children, young in their species but still old enough to understand what was happening, had received the vaccine. She held their hands and told them that they would be okay. She told them that their parents would want them to survive. She told them that the universe would need them to carry on. She was not sure if any of it was true, but she knew that false hope was better than no hope at all. By the end of the first day, 2,000 people on that Zithian world had received the vaccine. By the end of the second day, 15,000. By the end of the fifth day, more than half the surviving population had received treatment. The results were clear. The vaccine worked. People recovered. The plague was stopped in its tracks when the vaccine reached them. But it was already too late for some worlds. The Vrelians had been the first to fall. By the time vaccine distribution reached their remaining population, fewer than 5,000 Vrelians remained alive out of billions. Captain Han arrived to find empty cities. He found records, stored in protected computer systems, of what had been. He found art and music and scientific knowledge. He found the complete history of a civilization that had conquered the stars and was now gone from the universe. The Solians had taken a different path. They were silicon-based beings, not carbon-based like most coalition members. Their bodies worked differently. When the plague reached them, they understood what was happening. Rather than allow their consciousness to simply end, they began copying their minds into computer systems. It was a process that had never been attempted before on such a scale. When Choi Mi-young arrived at their main world, she found that 40% of the Solian population still existed, but only as digital consciousness trapped in machines. "We do not know if this is survival," the digital voice of the Solian leader explained. "We do not know if we are still ourselves or copies of ourselves, but we exist, and we chose to exist, which is something." The vaccine reached other worlds. Captain Han and physician Choi Mi-young led teams to dozens of locations. They distributed medicine, they treated the sick, they bore witness to the end of civilizations and the saving of survivors. They worked without sleeping for days at a time. They saw the worst and the best of what life could do. They saw people choosing to die with their families. They saw people who fought with every breath to live. They saw both kinds of courage. The political opposition to the vaccine program intensified as the distribution continued. Some coalition members spread propaganda saying the vaccine was causing new problems. Some claimed that accepting human help was a sign of weakness. There were attacks on distribution centers. There were governments that refused to allow vaccination in their territories, believing instead that the plague was part of natural evolution. But Counselor Ha-jin held firm. She used her political power to protect the vaccine program. When other coalition members challenged her, she went public with the numbers. She showed how many lives had been saved. She showed how many civilizations had been brought back from the edge of extinction. She showed evidence that the vaccine worked, that it was safe, and that refusing to use it was suicide disguised as philosophy. The turning point came when Senator Rockwell, one of the oldest and most respected members of the coalition, made a public statement. Rockwell was an ancient being, more than 500 years old, with connections to the oldest members of coalition space. "I have lived a long time," Rockwell said in a broadcast that reached every corner of coalition space. "I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have seen wars and peace. I have never seen one species willingly save another from extinction. The humans did this. The humans, who were beneath our notice just days ago, saved billions of us. They did not do it for power. They did not do it for conquest. They did it because it was the right thing to do. If we reject them now, we reject the very thing that makes us worthy of being saved." After that, the opposition crumbled. Governments that had refused the vaccine suddenly opened their borders. Worlds that had been turned away were welcomed. The distribution accelerated. The plague, which had been an unstoppable force, began to slow. It began to stop. It began to become a thing of the past rather than the present. Physician Choi Mi-young stood on the bridge of Han's ship, looking at a summary of the vaccination numbers. More than 4 billion people had now received the vaccine. More than 2 million lives had been saved directly. Entire civilizations had been pulled back from the brink of extinction. "We did it," Captain Han said, standing beside her. "Humanity did it. We saved the galaxy." Choi Mi-young shook her head slightly. "We did not save the galaxy," she said quietly. "The humans saved the galaxy. We were just the hands that delivered the medicine, but I think, maybe, that is enough. I think, maybe that is everything." The Coalition's Peace Summit was being held on a station that had been redesigned specifically for the occasion. The walls had been expanded, the corridors widened, the atmosphere modified to accommodate every type of being that might attend. Representatives from 43 different species arrived for the meeting. Some flew, some walked on legs, some floated through the air. Some existed as energy given temporary form. All of them were coming to decide what Earth's place would be in the universe. Secretary General Park Sung-ju was the first human to ever attend a coalition summit as an official representative. He was a diplomat who had spent 40 years working with international governments on Earth. He had learned that negotiation was about understanding what each side truly wanted, not just what they said they wanted. He suspected this negotiation would be about far more than just trade agreements and military alliances. Park Sung-ju stood in the briefing room before the summit began, reviewing the documents that would be presented. Chief Scientist Yoon Ji-hai was with him, preparing the medical evidence that proved humanity's biological value was not an accident, but a pattern. Yoon Ji-hai was one of the most respected scientists on Earth. She had studied human evolution with fierce intelligence. Now she would present that research to beings who had never known humans existed. The key, Yoon Ji-hai said, pointing to her prepared presentation, is showing them that human resilience is not random. It is the result of evolutionary pressure that was different from theirs. Our planet was dangerous in ways their home worlds were not. Our species survived multiple extinction events. That survival created biology that is fundamentally more flexible than what they have. They will resist this, Park Sung-ju said quietly. Many of them have spent centuries or longer believing that they are the most advanced beings in the galaxy. Admitting that a primitive species has superior biology will challenge their entire understanding of advancement. Then we need to change how they think about advancement, Yoon Ji-hai replied. The summit began with formal greetings and speeches. Counselor Ha-jin opened the proceedings and presented the case for full coalition membership for Earth. She laid out the facts clearly. Humans had saved billions of lives. Humans had developed a vaccine that no other species could have created. Humans had proven that their value was not in technology or military might, but in something far more fundamental. Their value was in how their bodies worked. Then the opposition began. A representative from the Kessian Empire stood up, his form shifting slightly as he expressed anger. We should not reward those who are genetically fortunate with the same status as those who have worked for millions of years to develop their civilizations, he said. The humans did nothing but exist. That is not worthy of coalition membership. A Zithian diplomat countered him immediately. The humans did everything but exist. They developed a vaccine. They shared it freely. They asked for nothing in return. They asked for membership, the Kessian shot back. They asked to be treated as equals. How is that asking for nothing? Park Sung-ju listened to the arguments go back and forth. He understood that much of what was being said was not really about whether Earth deserved membership. It was about pride. It was about how various species understood their place in the universe. If humans became full coalition members, if humans proved that biological fitness mattered more than technological advancement, then all the old hierarchies would need to be reconsidered. Then Yoon Ji-hai stood to present her research. She showed how human evolution had shaped biology that was fundamentally different from coalition species. She showed how thousands of years of surviving plagues had created immune systems that could adapt to threats that had never been encountered. She showed how human culture, shaped by survival, created societies that could think in unconventional ways. She showed scientific evidence that humans were not primitive at all. They were differently evolved. Advancement is not a single ladder that all species climb, Yoon Ji-hai said, her voice clear and strong. It is a tree with many branches. Humans evolved on a different branch. We adapted to different challenges. And those adaptations have proven to be exactly what the galaxy needed. This is not luck. This is evolution working as it was meant to work. After her presentation, there was silence. Then questions began. Hundreds of questions about human biology, human history, human potential. The summit continued through the night. Park Sung-ju was asked to speak. He stood before beings that had never seen Earth, had never seen humans except through video communication, and he talked about what it meant to be human. He talked about human creativity. He talked about human persistence. He talked about how humans had created art and music and poetry while facing extinction. He talked about how humans had always, throughout their entire history, tried to help others, even when those others wanted nothing to do with them. "We are not asking to be treated as the most advanced," Park Sung-ju said. "We are not asking to be treated as the greatest military power or the most developed technology. We are asking for one thing. We are asking to be recognized as part of something larger than ourselves. We are asking to belong to the coalition, to work together with your species, to face the future together. That is all we have ever asked." The vote was called on the final day of the summit. Representatives from all coalition species voted on whether to grant Earth full membership. The vote was close, but not as close as many had expected. 72% voted in favor. A few species voted against, but the majority had decided. Humanity was now part of the coalition. After the vote, Counselor Ha-jin found Park Sung-ju in a quiet corridor of the station. She looked tired, but there was something like satisfaction in her eyes. "They will not accept this easily," she said. "There are those who believe we have made a mistake. There are those who are organizing resistance. But you have legal membership now. That means something." "Thank you," Park Sung-ju said. "I do not know if I could have done this without your support." "You would have," Ha-jin said, "because you had to, because your species had no choice. When you have nothing but the truth, you have everything you need." That night, Park Sung-ju sent a message back to Earth. It was transmitted through coalition communication networks, traveling faster than light through paths that humans had never been able to use before. The message was simple. We did it. Humanity is part of the coalition. We are part of the galaxy now. On Earth, people gathered in cities and in villages. They watched the news and understood that their species had changed. The age of isolation was over. The age of humanity as a peripheral species was over. They were now recognized as equals. They had earned this not through conquest, but through doing the right thing when it mattered most. Chief Scientist Yoon Ji-hai sat in her office on Earth, watching the celebrations on the screens. She thought about how one plague had changed everything. She thought about how humans had gone from being unknown to being essential. She thought about how the galaxy had almost been destroyed by a disease that humans were barely affected by. And she thought about how evolution had spent millions of years preparing humanity for this exact moment. "The universe is strange," she said quietly to herself. "It creates crises and then plants solutions inside the DNA of species that do not even know they are solutions. Somewhere, something is laughing at how perfectly everything worked out." In coalition space, Counselor Ha-jin received a message from the Vrelian survivors. There were still only a few thousand of them, but they had decided to accept the vaccine program. They were beginning to recover. They were beginning to rebuild. And they sent their thanks to humanity, the species that had saved them from extinction. The plague had ended civilizations. But it had also begun something new. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. It had made partners out of species that had never known each other existed. It had transformed the unknown into the essential. And it had given humanity a place in a future that was just beginning to take shape.